Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen watched her reflection distort across the crystalline walls of the Lumini diplomatic vessel. Her standard-issue combat uniform looked jarringly out of place among the ethereal architecture. The iridescent corridors pulsed with soft light that seemed to emanate from the very structure itself, making her feel like she was walking through the inside of an alien sapphire. The Lumini guards accompanying her were even more remarkable than their ship. Their translucent bodies shimmered with waves of professional blue-green alertness, occasionally rippling with flecks of curious yellow whenever they glanced her way. Chen had studied their color-emotion correlations extensively during her mission prep, but seeing it in person was something else entirely. "The princess will receive you in the resonance chamber," announced the lead guard, his form briefly flickering with authoritative gold. Chen nodded, keeping her face carefully neutral. 6 months of diplomatic security training had taught her that the Lumini found human emotional control both fascinating and disturbing. Their species evolved with complete emotional transparency, their every feeling displayed in living color for all to see. The resonance chamber took Chen's breath away. Massive crystals grew from floor to ceiling, each one humming with a different harmonic frequency that combined into an ethereal symphony. At the chamber's center stood Princess Cathara, and Chen immediately understood why the Lumini royal family was legendary even among their own kind. The princess's crystalline form was more delicate and more intricate than any of her guards. Layer upon layer of transparent tissues created depth and complexity that made her look like a living diamond. Currently, she was radiating a serene aquamarine that spoke of diplomatic poise, until she turned and saw Chen. The change was immediate and dramatic. Waves of purple disgust rolled through Cathara's form, followed by clouds of deep indigo fear that turned her nearly opaque. Chen maintained her professional stance, but inwardly winced. Not the best start to a protection detail. "Your Highness," Chen said, bowing precisely to the depth specified in her cultural briefing. "I am Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen, assigned as your security liaison during the summit." Cathara's voice chimed like crystal wind chimes. "A human guardian." The princess's colours swirled with barely contained distaste. "Surely the Earth delegation understands that my own guards are more than capable. The summit security protocols require mixed species protection details for all high-ranking attendees," Chen replied evenly. "It's a gesture of mutual trust and cooperation." A ripple of something like bitter amusement passed through Cathara's form. Trust. With a species that hides their every emotion behind immobile faces. How can anyone trust what they cannot see? One of the Lumini guards flashed embarrassed orange at the princess's breach of diplomatic etiquette. Chen pretended not to notice. "With respect, Your Highness, different species demonstrate trustworthiness in different ways. Humans prove ourselves through actions rather than displays." Cathara drifted closer, her colours shifting rapidly as she studied Chen's face. The princess's proximity made the hair on the back of Chen's neck stand up. Being this close to a Lumini felt like standing next to a living electrical field. "And what actions do you plan to take, Sergeant Chen, should danger threaten?" "Whatever actions are necessary to ensure your safety, Your Highness." The princess's colours darkened. Even if those actions involve violence, even then. Cathara's form pulsed with visible distress. "How can you speak of such things while displaying nothing? No fear, no aggression, no uncertainty." She turned to her guards. "How are we to work with beings who might harbour any emotion behind their static expressions?" Chen met the princess's gaze steadily. "Sometimes, Your Highness, clarity of purpose matters more than clarity of emotion." The resonance chamber's crystals seemed to vibrate with tension as Human and Lumini regarded each other. Finally, Cathara's colours settled into a resigned blue-grey. "Very well, Sergeant. You may begin your duties. But do not expect me to be comfortable with your containment." Chen bowed again, already certain this assignment would test everything she knew about interspecies diplomacy. "Understood, Your Highness. Shall we review the summit schedule?" The diplomatic dinner aboard the Lumini vessel was an exercise in controlled chaos. Crystalline servers floated between tables, their forms rippling with professional focus as they delivered dishes designed for 6 different species' digestive systems. Princess Cathara sat at the high table, her colours a carefully maintained diplomatic aquamarine that only occasionally flickered with discomfort when she glanced at Chen standing guard behind her. Chen had positioned herself to have clear sightlines of all 3 entrance points, while remaining close enough to the princess to react if needed. The other security details, a mix of human and alien personnel, had arranged themselves similarly around their charges. Everything was proceeding according to protocol, which naturally meant something was about to go wrong. The first sign was subtle. A server's colours flashing momentary alarm before they composed themselves. Chen's hand drifted closer to her concealed sidearm. Years of experience had taught her to trust these small indicators. She scanned the room more intently, noting how the Lumini guard's colours had begun showing traces of anxiety. Cathara turned to her, irritation tinging her form. "Sergeant, your tension is disrupting the dinner's harmonic balance." Chen calmly dabbed her napkin to her lips, buying time to assess. "My apologies, Your Highness. Perhaps we should." The explosion at the far entrance cut her off. 3 figures in light-absorbing armour burst through the smoke, their weapons already tracking toward the high table. Chen's training took over. In one fluid motion, she pulled Cathara from her chair and down behind the crystalline table, drawing her sidearm simultaneously. The princess's form blazed with shocking white fear, but Chen was already firing. Her first shot caught the leftmost attacker in the shoulder, spinning them into their companion. The third attacker managed to get off a burst of plasma fire that sizzled overhead, spiderwebbing cracks through the chamber's crystal walls. The Lumini guards were still cycling through emergency colour patterns when Chen dropped her second target. Cathara watched in fascinated horror as the human moved with mechanical precision, each shot finding its mark, while Chen's face remained as impassive as ever. The third attacker fell just as security reinforcements began pouring through the uncompromised doors. "Area secured," Chen reported into her comm, her voice as steady as if she were reporting the weather. She turned to Cathara, who was still radiating panic colours so bright they were almost painful to look at. "Are you injured, Your Highness?" The princess's voice chimed with disbelief. How can you be so calm? They were trying to." Her colours swirled chaotically. "This is what I'm trained for," Chen replied, already scanning for secondary threats. "We need to move you to a secure location until we can verify there aren't more hostiles." "But you were eating dinner. You were using a napkin when it started." Thara's form rippled with confused yellows and greens. There wasn't even a moment of transition. No warning colours, no preparation signals. Chen efficiently reloaded her weapon while speaking. "Humans adapt quickly, Your Highness. Now please, we must." "No." Cathara's colours suddenly stilled into something more contemplative. "First, you will explain how you manage this level of control. My people believe that suppressing emotional display leads to mental instability, yet you just saved my life while appearing completely unchanged." "Your Highness, this really isn't the time." Consider it a royal command, Sergeant. The princess's form now showed streaks of determined orange. I need to understand. Chen met Kethara's gaze, recognizing the steel behind the request. We can discuss it in the secure bunker. But right now, I need you to trust that same control you're questioning and follow my lead. Can you do that? The princess's colors shifted through several patterns before settling into a hesitant but steady blue. Yes, but this conversation isn't over, Sergeant Chen. I wouldn't expect it to be, Your Highness. Stay close to me. The human secure facility was an austere contrast to the Lumini vessel. Thara drifted through its stark corridors like a lost rainbow, her form constantly shifting between fear purple and embarrassment orange. The only concession to her species' needs was the small crystal garden maintained for visiting dignitaries, which was where Chen found her hiding 3 hours after their relocation. The other diplomats are asking about you, Your Highness, Chen said, entering the garden. She pretended not to notice how the princess's colors darkened at her approach. Let them ask. Thara's voice chimed bitter notes. I'm certain they're all discussing how their princess cowers in a human bunker, displaying fear colors like an untrained juvenile. Chen studied the crystal formations growing around them. They were beautiful, but nothing like the living crystal of Lumini architecture. There's no shame in a natural reaction to danger. You don't understand. Thara turned to face her, frustration painting her form in angry reds. My people believe in total emotional honesty. Our colors are our truth. To show such weakness, it undermines everything a royal should be. And what should a royal be? Steady, confident, a lighthouse of stability for our people to follow. The princess's colors swirled chaotically. How do you humans bear it? Feeling everything we feel but never showing it? It must be torture. Chen walked closer, her boots silent on the garden's soft floor. We show emotion, Your Highness, just differently, more subtly. Lies. Kethara floated higher, agitation making her form pulse. I've studied humans extensively. Your faces barely move. Your skin maintains the same dull shade. Even during the attack, while saving my life, you showed nothing. The first tremor shook the facility before Chen could respond. Both women froze, listening to the distant rumble of explosions. Chen's hand moved to her sidearm, and then something interesting happened. Kethara's colors stilled. Sergeant, your hands are shaking. Chen looked down at her trembling fingers, then deliberately steadied them. Yes. But your face hasn't changed, no. Another explosion, closer this time. Chen moved toward the door, checking angles. Humans learned to control our obvious tells because they could get us killed. But the signs are still there, if you know where to look. The princess drifted closer, her own fear colors temporarily forgotten in her fascination. Show me. This isn't really the time. Please. Kethara's form shimmered with intensity. I need to understand. Chen sighed, then held out her hand. Watch closely. The princess observed as Chen's fingers twitched slightly, as tiny beads of sweat formed at her hairline, as her breathing shifted into a carefully controlled pattern. Each micro-expression and minute tension told its own story. These are fear signs, Kethara asked, and preparation signs, combat readiness. Chen gave a small smile. Humans are never as emotionless as we seem, Your Highness. We've just learned to work through our feelings rather than let them work through us. The facility rocked with another blast. Kethara's fear colors returned, But now they were threaded with something else. Curiosity, perhaps even determination. "How do you do it?" she asked. "How do you keep moving, keep functioning, when the fear is so strong?" Practice, training, and understanding that fear doesn't have to control our actions. Chen checked her tactical display. We need to move. The outer defenses are being breached. Cathara's colours swirled for a moment, then steadied into something more composed. "Show me." "Your Highness." "Show me how to keep moving through the fear, how to act despite it." The princess straightened, her crystalline form catching the garden's light. "If I must display my fear to my people, I want to show them it doesn't rule me." Chen studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Stay close. Match my movements. And remember, the goal isn't to feel nothing. It's to feel everything and choose your actions anyway." Together, they moved out into the darkened corridor. As somewhere above them, battle began to rage. Cathara's first weapons training session was going about as well as Chen had expected. The princess hovered near the bunker's practice range, her form cycling through waves of anxiety as she stared at the small defensive stunner Chen had procured for her. "This is barbaric," Cathara chimed, the notes of her voice sharp with distress. "Lumini royalty do not engage in violence. We lead through harmony and emotional resonance." Chen checked the stunner's safety settings again. "With respect, Your Highness, harmony doesn't work well against assassins. You've seen that firsthand. That's why we have guards." But the princess's colours shifted uncertainly. 3 attacks in 4 days had shaken her confidence in traditional protections. Guards can be compromised. Barriers can be breached. Chen held out the stunner. "But no one can take away your ability to defend yourself, unless you let them." Cathara's form rippled with reluctant curiosity. She reached out, then pulled back as her colours flashed embarrassment orange. "My hands, they won't stop trembling." "Good. Good." The princess's confusion painted her crystalline body in swirls of green. "It means you understand the seriousness of what you're learning." Chen stepped closer, her voice softening. "Fear of weapons is healthy, Your Highness. It means you respect their power. But respect doesn't mean we let that fear control us." Slowly, hesitantly, Cathara took the stunner. Her colours immediately blazed with anxiety purple, so bright it reflected off the practice range's walls. But she held on. "Now what?" she chimed, her musical voice wavering. "Now we learn the basics. Stance, grip, trigger discipline." Chen moved to demonstrate, then stopped as Cathara's colours suddenly pulsed with realization. "You're doing it again," the princess said. Your hand tightened on your weapon. Your breathing changed. You're nervous about teaching me. Chen allowed herself a small smile. Teaching royalty to shoot comes with certain professional risks. Yet you suggested it anyway. Why? Because sometimes protecting someone means teaching them to protect themselves. Chen adjusted Cathara's grip on the stunner, even if it makes both of us uncomfortable. They spent the next hour working on fundamentals. Cathara's fear colours never fully faded, but gradually they began to mix with other shades: concentration, determination, and occasionally even flickers of pride when she managed a difficult technique. "Remember," Chen said as they finished, "the goal isn't to make the fear go away, it's to." The explosion caught them both off guard. Chen was moving before the debris settled, placing herself between Cathara and the breach in the practice range's wall. Through the smoke, she could make out multiple figures in light-absorbing armour. "Behind me, Your Highness," Chen ordered, drawing her sidearm. But Cathara didn't move. The princess hovered in place, her fear purple shot through with threads of steel grey. The stunner in her hands trembled, but remained pointed toward the breach. "Your Highness." "You said it yourself, Sergeant." Cathara's voice chimed with forced steadiness. "Sometimes we must act despite our fear." The first attacker burst through the smoke. Chen dropped them with 2 precise shots, already tracking toward the second. Beside her, Cathara's stunner discharged with a crack of electromagnetic energy. Her shot went wide, but the burst of power made their attackers hesitate. That moment of hesitation was all Chen needed. In seconds, the skirmish was over, leaving 3 unconscious assailants on the floor. "Your form needs work," Chen said mildly, surveying the scene. "But your timing was perfect." Cathara's colours were a chaos of fear, shock, and something that might have been satisfaction. I actually fired at someone." "You did." "I was terrified." "You still are." Chen saved her weapon. "But you acted anyway. That's what courage is, Your Highness." The princess stared at the stunner in her hands, her colours slowly settling into a new pattern, one that showed her fear clearly, but refused to let it stand alone. "Teach me more," she chimed softly, "while we still have time." Chen nodded, understanding that something fundamental had shifted in the crystalline royal. "Of course, Your Highness. We'll start with target practice this time." Word spread quickly through the secure bunker about how the Lumini princess spent her mornings. The sight of Cathara practicing combat maneuvers with a human soldier drew quiet crowds of diplomatic staff, who tried to appear busy while stealing glances at the unprecedented scene. "They're staring again," Cathara chimed as she moved through a defensive stance. Her colours flickered between embarrassment orange and concentration blue. "Let them," Chen replied, circling the princess with practice pads raised. "Focus on your form." They had been training for 5 days, and Cathara's progress was remarkable. Though her fear colours still dominated during their sessions, they were increasingly threaded through with determination. Her crystalline body, naturally graceful in float mode, was learning to channel that grace into controlled movement. "Ready?" Chen asked, settling into an offensive stance. Cathara's colours steadied into what Chen had started calling her combat spectrum, a complex blend of fear purple, focus blue, and something uniquely her own. "Ready." Ken struck first, a measured pad swing toward Cathara's midsection. The princess slipped sideways, her form flowing like liquid crystal as she evaded. Her counter-strike wasn't perfect, but it was faster than yesterday's attempts. "Better," Chen approved, launching another combination. "Remember your anchoring point." Thara blocked one strike, but missed the follow-up, Chen's pad tapping her shoulder lightly. The princess's colours flashed frustration red before she forced them to settle. Again. They continued sparring, their movements creating an odd dance of human precision and alien fluidity. Cathara was learning to use her species' natural floating ability to her advantage, changing elevations in ways a ground-bound opponent would find difficult to counter. "You're thinking too much," Chen commented after blocking a hesitant strike. "Trust your training. Let your body." She didn't finish the sentence. Cathara suddenly flowed forward, fear colours blazing but movements sure. One crystalline arm deflected Chen's pad, while the other struck through her guard. For a fraction of a second, human and alien froze in place. The princess's practice weapon pressed against Chen's chest in a perfect stopping strike. The watching crowd erupted in hastily muffled exclamations. Thara's colours exploded into brilliant patterns of shock, disbelief, and triumph so bright they nearly overwhelmed the bunker's lighting. "I did it," she chimed, her voice ringing with surprise. "I actually did it." Chen stepped back, allowing herself a real smile. "You did. Clean hit. Perfect form." "But I was terrified. My colors were visible to everyone, yes. Did it stop you?" Cathara's form stilled as understanding bloomed. No, it didn't." "That's the lesson I've been trying to teach you," Chen said quietly. "True courage isn't about not feeling fear. It's about acknowledging it, accepting it, and acting anyway." The princess's colors shifted into something contemplative, like humans do with your subtle signs and controlled responses. "Exactly. We feel everything you do, Your Highness. We just learned different ways of processing it." Cathara drifted closer, her form now showing curious yellows. "Before, I thought human emotional control was a kind of deception. But it's not, is it? It's another form of strength." "Different species, different adaptations," Chen shrugged. "Neither better nor worse, just different." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent beeping from Chen's tactical display. Her posture shifted instantly into alert readiness, and she noticed with approval how Cathara picked up on the subtle cues, her own colors settling into combat readiness. "Status." The princess chimed, "All business now." "Message from command. They've identified the source of the attacks." Chen's expression hardened. "You're not going to like it, Your Highness." Cathara's colors showed apprehension, but remained steady. "Tell me." "The orders came from within your royal court. Someone very close to you is behind this." The princess's colors exploded into a maelstrom of shock, hurt, and betrayal. But underneath the emotional display, Chen noted how her newly trained combat stance never wavered. "Show me the evidence," Cathara chimed, her voice crystalline steel. "And then, Sergeant Chen, you're going to help me plan our response." Chen nodded, recognizing in her student's stance that same immovable core humans hid behind subtle signs. "Of course, Your Highness. That's what friends are for." Cathara stared at the security footage playing on the bunker's main display, her colors cycling through shades Chen had never seen before. The video showed High Counselor Vurex, the princess's most trusted advisor since childhood, calmly deactivating security systems to allow the assassins aboard the diplomatic vessel. "It's not possible," Cathara chimed, but her colors betrayed her growing certainty. "Vurex helped raise me. She taught me everything I know about diplomatic protocol, about maintaining proper royal composure, about—" The princess stopped, her form suddenly pulsing with revelation, "about how humans couldn't be trusted because they hide their emotions." Chen watched as Cathara's colors shifted so violently, she worried the princess might destabilize. Lumini could, in cases of extreme emotional trauma, actually shatter their crystalline forms. She moved closer, ready to intervene if necessary. "Your Highness." She was wrong. Cathara's voice cut through the room like breaking glass. About everything. About humans. About emotional transparency. About— The princess's colors began cycling faster. About what strength really means. The tactical display chimed another alert. Chen checked it, her expression tightening. They're making their move. Vurex is calling an emergency session of the Lumini delegation. She's claiming to have evidence that humans orchestrated the attacks. A preemptive strike, Cathara analyzed, her diplomatic training asserting itself. She'll use the fear and distrust she's been cultivating to turn my people against the Alliance before we can expose her. We need to stop her. Yes, Cathara turned to Chen, her colors still chaotic, but her voice steady. But first, teach me one more thing. Your Highness, teach me how to do what you do. How to, not exactly hide my colours, but control them. Just for a moment, just long enough to act. Chen frowned. I thought Lumini couldn't control their emotional displays. We're not supposed to. It's considered a form of deception. Cathara's form rippled with determination. But you've taught me that sometimes, just sometimes, control can be its own kind of truth. They spent the next 15 minutes practicing breathing techniques and focusing exercises. Thara struggled, her colours refusing to fully cooperate, but gradually she managed to achieve brief moments of chromatic stability. It won't last long, the princess admitted, her natural colours already reasserting themselves. But maybe it doesn't have to. Another alert sounded. The delegation is assembling, Chen reported. Virex is preparing to present her evidence. Thara straightened, her fear purple now laced with threads of steel-grey resolve. Then it's time to present mine. She turned to Chen. You'll be by my side. Always, Your Highness. The princess's colours softened briefly. You've seen me at my most afraid, taught me when I was most vulnerable, and stood by me when I needed strength. I think, Sergeant Chen, you've earned the right to use my name. Before Chen could respond, the bunker's perimeter alarm screamed to life. Multiple breaches, all sectors. Virex wasn't taking any chances this time. They're trying to box us in, Chen analysed, drawing her weapon. Keep us from reaching the delegation. Cathara moved to Chen's side, her own stunner ready. Her colours showed clear fear, but her stance was perfect. Then we'll have to fight our way through. There are at least 20 hostiles between us and the assembly chamber. Then it's fortunate, Cathara chimed, her voice taking on that crystalline steel quality Chen had come to admire, that I have an excellent teacher. Together, they moved toward the bunker's exit. Just before they reached the door, Thara paused. Her colours stilled, just for a moment, into that impossible stability they'd practiced. Sarah, she chimed softly, using Chen's first name for the first time. Whatever happens next, thank you, for showing me that fear doesn't have to be the end of the story. Chen nodded, allowing herself a small smile, ready to write the next chapter. Cathara's colours bloomed into their now familiar combat spectrum. Ready. The door slid open, and princess and soldier moved out together, each showing their courage in their own way. The crystalline throne room of the Lumini delegation had never seen anything like this moment. Thara hovered before her assembled people, her fear purple visible to all, but shot through with bands of steel-grey determination. Behind her, Chen stood at ready attention, her subtle combat signs visible only to the princess who had learned to read them. Virex floated at the chamber's centre, her form radiating righteous gold. My fellow Lumini, the evidence is clear. These humans have orchestrated every attack, seeking to destabilize our society through fear. Their very presence is a threat to our way of life. Is that why you let the assassins aboard our ship? Cathara's voice rang out, each note precise as cut crystal. The assembled delegates rippled with shock green at her accusation. Your Highness, Virex's colours shifted dismissively. You are clearly traumatized by recent events. These human-inspired delusions. Play the footage. The throne room's crystalline walls came alive with the security recording. The delegates watched in horror as their High Counselor methodically disabled their protections. Virex's colours flashed panic white before she forced them into diplomatic calm. Altered footage, she chimed dismissively. Human deceptions. The first shot caught everyone by surprise. A hidden assassin's plasma burst struck Chen in the shoulder, spinning her sideways. The human didn't cry out, but Cathara saw the tiny tells, the tightened jaw, the controlled breathing. That spoke of pain. The throne room erupted into chaos. Hidden attackers emerged from concealed positions, their light-absorbing armor stark against the crystal walls. Virex's colors blazed triumph gold as she retreated to a protected position. "You see," she called out, "the humans bring only violence. They corrupt our princess, teach her barbaric ways, turn her against her own people." Cathara watched Chen struggle to her feet, noting how the human's trained composure never wavered despite her injury. The princess felt her own fear purple blazing bright enough to illuminate the chamber. And for the first time in her life, she let it shine without shame. "Yes," she chimed, her voice carrying over the chaos. "Look at my fear, my people. See it clearly. I am terrified." She raised her stunner, stance perfect despite her trembling. "And I am going to act anyway." She fired her first shot, just as Chen had taught her. One of Virex's assassins dropped, their armor's systems overloaded by the concentrated electromagnetic pulse. The delegates stared in shock at their princess, her fear visible to all, yet her actions unstoppable. "The humans didn't corrupt me," Cathara continued, moving smoothly to her next target. "They taught me that feeling fear and showing fear doesn't make us weak. Acting despite our fear makes us strong." Chen had recovered enough to provide covering fire, her movements economical despite her injury. Together, they began systematically neutralizing the attackers. Cathara's fear colors never faded, but neither did her resolve. Virex taught us that emotional control was deception. The princess called out as she fought. That humans were lesser because they hide their feelings. She was wrong. There are many kinds of truth, many kinds of strength. The tide began to turn. Other Lumini guards, inspired by their princess's display, joined the fight. They stopped trying to suppress their fear colors, instead letting them show while they acted with courage. Virex watched her support crumble. With a cry of rage, she launched herself at Cathara, her form blazing with hatred red. The princess met her charge with textbook precision, using her attacker's momentum just as Chen had taught her. Virex crashed to the ground, her colors dimming into unconsciousness. In the sudden quiet, Cathara found herself the focus of every eye and every color-sensing organ in the chamber. Her fear purples still swirled clearly, now mixed with pain, sorrow, and exhaustion. But she remained upright, her posture royal despite her trembling. "This," she chimed softly, indicating her own transparent display of fear and determination, "is what real strength looks like. This is what the humans helped me understand. We do not need to hide our fear." She turned to help Chen stand. "We simply need the courage to act despite it." The throne room filled with colors of understanding, and something in Lumini society shifted forever. 2 weeks after the throne room battle, the diplomatic summit was drawing to a close. The Lumini delegation chamber had been repaired, its crystal walls singing with renewed harmony. But something fundamental had changed in the way the crystalline beings carried themselves. Their emotional displays remained as vivid as ever, but they no longer scrambled to suppress their fear colors or hide their uncertainties. Thara stood before the assembled delegates, her form showing a complex spectrum of emotions she would have once been ashamed to display. At her side, Chen stood at parade rest, her dress uniform immaculate, her injured shoulder nearly healed. "The alliance between our peoples stands stronger for having been tested," Cathara chimed, her voice resonating through the chamber. "We learned that strength comes in many forms, and that understanding our differences makes us greater than hiding from them. The princess turned to Chen, her colours shifting into something warm and respectful. Sergeant Sarah Chen showed me that courage isn't about feeling no fear. It's about feeling it fully and choosing to act anyway. She taught me that humans don't hide their emotions out of deception, but channeled them into purposeful action. From a crystalline case, Cathara withdrew something that made the assembled delegates pulse with astonishment green. It was the star of luminous truth, the highest honour in Lumini society, never before awarded to a non-Lumini. This award, Cathara continued, has traditionally celebrated those who display perfect emotional transparency. Today, we recognise that truth comes in many forms. Sergeant Chen's subtle signs of emotion, her controlled responses, her willing vulnerability in teaching me. These too are forms of truth. Chen stepped forward, her composure perfect save for the slight tremor in her hands that only Cathara would recognise as emotion. The princess carefully pinned the crystalline star to her uniform. With this recognition, Cathara chimed, "We acknowledge that strength and honesty can be shown in different ways. We honour not just Sergeant Chen, but the understanding between our peoples that her actions helped forge." Chen saluted crisply, then spoke in carefully practiced Lumini tones. "The honour is mine, Your Highness. Your willingness to learn, to change, to face your fears, these were the true acts of courage." Thara's colours rippled with fond amusement. "You're still terrible at our language, sir. And you still telegraph your left strikes, Kithar." The delegates pulsed with shock at the informal exchange, then with something like understanding. This too was a kind of truth, the truth of friendship forged in fear and fire. "I'm keeping up the combat training," Cathara announced, both to Chen and the assembly. A ruler should understand all forms of strength, not just the traditional ones. And perhaps, our colours shifted thoughtfully. Perhaps it's time we reviewed other Lumini traditions as well. What else might we learn from those we once thought too different to understand? Chen smiled one of her small, controlled smiles. "Change can be frightening, Your Highness." "Yes," Cathara agreed, her fear purple swirling visibly, but now permanently threaded through with that steel-grey determination. "But we know what to do with fear now, don't we?" Later, as the summit's closing ceremonies commenced, Chen stood at her usual guard position. She watched Cathara move among the delegates, the princess's colours shifting freely through fear, uncertainty, determination, and hope. Each emotion was clear to see, yet none of them controlled her actions. "You've changed us, you know," Cathara chimed softly as she passed. "Not just me, but all of us. We'll never be the same." Chen nodded slightly. "Change isn't always a bad thing, Your Highness." "No," the princess agreed, her colours settling into that unique pattern that meant their friendship. "Sometimes it's the truest thing of all." Together, they watched the delegation disperse, each species carrying home new understandings about strength, fear, and the many ways that truth could be displayed. And if the humans stood a little more openly, and the Lumini moved a little more purposefully, well, that too was a kind of victory.